In this video, I'm going to talk about the step-by-step process that I took that got me a job here in Canada. Coming up. Let's turn the clock back a little bit. A couple of months before I'm about to graduate, I don't really have a plan for a job. I don't know where I'm going to find a job. I don't even know what I want to do for a job. I've got my thesis that I have to submit. All of my attention is going to, okay, how can I put the most amount of work into my studies so I can pass my studies and finish it? So I hadn't applied to any jobs. I had no idea where to apply, and quite frankly, I didn't even know what time was a good time to apply and which companies would be hiring. So I didn't have any knowledge at all, right? Critical mistake, number one, because what's going to happen is you're not going to be ahead of the curve. Once you graduate, you'll kind of be just a fish out of water looking around like, what am I supposed to be doing? Where do I start and whatnot? So come December, I decide as soon as I graduated that I'm going to move to Vancouver because I wanted to be in Vancouver. I moved out of Kamloops. I came to Vancouver here to look for a job. Now this city is much bigger and much more expensive, so you don't have a lot of time to find a job, right? So I knew someone here. I took up a part-time job. Well, it was more of a full-time job, but started off as a part-time job, and that was enough for me just to make money to pay my rent while I can look for another position, right? But you know what ends up happening is when you're making money and you can pay your rent and you're kind of getting comfortable with everything, you stop trying. So that's what I did. I didn't really apply to any places. I was fine working the job I was working, even though it had nothing to do with my skill set, nothing to do with what I was passionate about. But just the fact that I had any money coming in, I was just more than happy about it, okay? So that's a mistake I made, not applying earlier on, not looking for other jobs that are actually more suitable for me. Now, one thing I wish I had done was have a game plan before I had graduated. Know, okay, this is exactly the kind of job I want. How can I get that job? Okay, so there's some things you have to consider. One, you have to have a resume that's fit for the kind of job you're applying to. A lot of us, when we have a resume, we think a resume is amazing. It's great. Yeah, I'm going to use that resume to apply to every single job, and one of them is bound to call me. That's the attitude I had, and it's a terrible attitude to have because your resume is not going to fit every single job you apply to. Every single job has a separate job description, separate things they're looking for. It's a separate company, so you'll have to tailor make your resume individually to every single job. And you can check out some of my videos. I've made so many videos about resumes as well. So that was my number one mistake. Even when I was applying to some jobs, I had such a poor resume that a lot of them would just get rejected right off the bat. And the jobs that I was getting calls from, they were very, very low-end marketing jobs where I had to work at a telecom center or something. Not really a job I really wanted. So I wish I had taken up more time prior to graduating, taking advantage of the university access and the faculty members to really make a really, really good resume, okay? If you don't have a good resume and you're applying to jobs, honestly, you might as well not apply because you're just getting rejected and the position's going to get filled out by someone else. Number two, not knowing what I wanted to do and not knowing the field that I wanted to get into. This was a major, major mistake. One really helpful thing I've learned, okay? Now, suppose you want a job as a management consultant or perhaps a junior accountant. Let's go with junior accountant. And you don't really know how to get started in that industry, okay? So what you'll do is a lot of people, they start applying immediately, but it makes it a little difficult because your resume is just one resume out of about 500 resumes, right? So here's something I suggest. This is something I learned from one of my career advisors. It's called informative interviews, okay? So informative interviews are when you reach out to people who are already doing what you want to do. So for example, if you want to be a junior accountant, you'll go to LinkedIn or you'll find people who are doing that job, who are currently in that position. You'll reach out to them. You'll say, hey, can I just have 5 minutes of your time just to ask you how you got into your position? And if you reach out to say 10 people, maybe 5 of them would reply, yeah, sure, connect with me on a phone call, or if they're in the same city, connect with me, come have a coffee, we'll talk about it. So you have someone who has gotten the job that you want in front of you, and you can ask them all those questions like, What did you have to do to find this position? What are you liking about this position? What are some things you think you really needed to do to get good at this job? So they'll give you a whole roadmap. These are the things you need by the time you apply for the job, okay? Now the purpose is not to meet them and ask for a job. That's not the purpose at all. You're not doing this to land a job for yourself. You're trying to understand when you do apply what are some things you need, and also understand more about the job itself. Is that something you'll want to do? Now, what you've done is you've understood what the job is. You understood what the daily responsibilities look like. You've also understood what it takes to get that job. And when you're talking to someone about themselves, about their experiences, they feel good about it as well. So you've made a connection with someone as well, right? So say a couple of months down the line, something opens up and they're like, oh, you know what? This one person came up to me asking about my job and he was very interested in this role. Why don't I just reach out to him and tell him that there's an opening? Sometimes what happens is even before a job goes live on all the job boards online, they try to recruit internally, or perhaps they try to recruit via referral. So they'll ask around internally, hey, do you know anyone who might be a good fit for this position? So if someone knows you from inside the company, they might recommend you, and you might go right to the front of the line, get your interviews, and perhaps even score the job. So a very, very important thing to getting a job here is to make connections, to reach out to people who are doing the thing that you want to do, making connections in different places, and as soon as there's a job that opens up, you'll be able to get ahead of the competition. So when I was looking for a job, what I did was I reached out to a lot of people on LinkedIn, and I asked them the same question. Hey, can I meet up? Can I ask you a couple of questions? And so many of them were so nice to give me enough time to actually meet up with me over coffee. I asked them all the intricate questions about what should I need, what should I have to prepare for. And not only did they point out the things that I needed, but they also pointed out things that I should improve in my resume. And after doing all of that, after applying to a bunch of places, with that advice, knowing what employers will be looking for, then I started getting calls for interviews. Then I started getting calls for different job opportunities. So don't be discouraged when you're about to graduate and you don't really know what's going on. You need a proper resume. You need a network. I can't stress that enough. You really, really need a network. Now, let me just drive that point home about network. Okay, so I had a good resume. I had all the information I needed about the job. You might be the perfect person on paper, but if your timing is off, then you might have missed the boat. So what do I mean by that? I mean, if they're already really far along in the recruiting process, meaning that they've already done all the interviews and then you applied, they're not going to go back and interview again. Chances are they already have 5 to 10 really good candidates, and they'll just proceed with one of them. So sometimes your timing just may be off, okay? So for me, that was the case with one of these positions. I went for an interview. The job looked really, really good, but what happened was they had already moved to the last stages with some of their candidates, and they were like, okay, you know what, we're just going to proceed with them. So I was really bummed out about that. I was like, oh, okay, this job was perfect. This is exactly what I was looking for. But one of my mentors said, your networking doesn't just stop at professional events. You just have to tell people about it. You have to ask everyone you meet, hey, what do you do for a living and whatnot. So that's what I did. I went to the gym the next day, my martial arts gym, and I was just talking to random people there, and I was actually doing some sparring in the gym as well with them. And one of them happened to ask me, so what are you doing in Vancouver? What do you do for a living? And I just said, oh, I'm actually just looking for a job, and this is kind of what my industry is, and I'm interviewing in some places. And then the person I was talking to ended up being in the same industry that I was looking at. And eventually they said, okay, tell me a little bit about your experience. So it ended up being a mini interview on the floor of the gym. And I told him a little bit about my experience. He said, you know what, my company is hiring for that exact job. I sent him my resume. He sent his resume to the boss. I got a call from the boss. I had an in-person interview. I prepared for the interview. And then I got the job. So your networking does not stop at just professional events or say asking people for information. You have to really take advantage of every single person that you meet. So me finding the job, it was really about knowing what I should put on my resume, knowing the right people in the right network to tell me what I needed, having those skills in place. So by the time I met this person who offered me a job, I already had a good resume. I already knew what to expect from the position, and I already knew how to perform once I got the position. So I was in a very, very, very good position. A mistake I made, and a lot of mistakes that students make, is they graduate and then they don't have a plan. They don't know what they're going to do. They waste too much money. Or sometimes I've seen people graduate and work in retail for a year after they're graduating with like a master's degree, and it just blows my mind how myself and other people would do that. Like, you've graduated with a degree, not many people have that opportunity, and now you're working in a very, very small position. And if you're giving this much money for a degree, you shouldn't be doing that, right? So bottom line, my advice to you is, before you graduate, take as much time as you can to narrow down exactly what kind of job you want. Find out what resume format works best for that, what skills you'll need for that, so that before you graduate you can get those skills. Make sure you take advantage of all the people at your university to make the best possible resume. If you need a skill set that you don't have, you still have some time to garner that skill, right? Maybe you need a certification that you don't already have. You will have time by the time you apply. So the moment you graduate, you should have already applied to a bunch of places, and you should be hearing back from them, so that once you graduate, you're already walking into interviews, and maybe under a month or something like that, you have something secured for yourself. So don't wait up until you graduate to start looking. Start researching, narrow down, pinpoint the kind of job you're looking for, find the right people in the networks, plant that seed, ask them what kind of skill set they need, and eventually, after trial and error, after applying again and again, you will get rejected, but eventually you will start getting calls, and then you can start focusing on your interview skills as well. I'm going to be making a whole list of videos on interview skills and how to best get the hiring managers to offer you a job after the interview, because if you've done this whole process, you've gotten to the interview stage, and the interview goes terrible, all of that work just goes down the drain, right? So there's some very, very basic things you can do to ace the interview. I will be talking about that in the future. Again, I hope you enjoyed this perspective. I wanted to give you some information about how I got a job, and how you can as well. And I'll be sharing some more insight coming up in the future. Let me know in the description what your biggest challenge is, or what you're worried about when it comes to finding a job in Canada, and I'll try to address that in future videos. As always, make sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.